Hello, and welcome. If you've clicked on this video, perhaps you're in a season where nothing seems to turn out right, where your best efforts feel like they're falling short again, where the word failure follows you like a shadow, whispering that maybe you're just not cut out for this, whatever this might be. Now settle in. Close your eyes if you can. Let's travel together to a small mountain village, where the morning mist clings to cobblestone streets, and the sound of wooden looms creates a gentle rhythm that has echoed through these walls for generations. In this village lived a young woman named Elara. Her fingers were long and nimble, her eyes sharp and determined. She had come to apprentice under Master Theron, the most skilled weaver in 3 kingdoms. His tapestries hung in royal halls. His cloth was sought after by nobles and merchants alike. Elara's small room above the workshop was sparse: a narrow bed, a wooden chair, and shelves lined with samples of thread in every color imaginable. Crimson silk that caught the light like liquid fire, midnight blue wool that felt like touching the night sky, golden thread so fine it seemed to be spun from sunbeams themselves. Every morning before dawn, she would light her single candle and practice. Her fingers would dance across the practice loom, pulling threads tight, creating patterns she'd memorized from Master Theron's instruction. Over and over, she would weave small squares of fabric, each one meant to be perfect, each one meant to prove she was worthy. But perfection was a cruel master. The threads would tangle, the tension would be wrong to tie, and the fabric would pucker and pull to loose, and the pattern would sag. Colors that should have complemented each other would clash. What was meant to be a rose looked more like a bruise. What was meant to be a flowing river appeared as a jagged scar. Night after night, Elara would unravel her work. The soft whisper of threads being pulled apart became the soundtrack of her shame. She would bundle up the tangled mess and start again, her jaw set with determination, her heart heavy with the weight of not being good enough. Master Theron would walk by her station, his footsteps slow and measured. He would pause, examine her work with those knowing eyes, and simply nod before moving on. No praise, no criticism, just that nod that could mean anything or nothing. The other apprentices seemed to weave with an ease that tormented Elara. Their fingers moved like they were born knowing the secrets of warp and weft. Their patterns emerged clean and true. When they made mistakes, they were small ones easily fixed, quickly forgotten. But Elara's mistakes were different. They were fundamental. They made her question whether she had any business holding a shuttle at all. Then came the commission that would change everything. A royal messenger arrived on a gray morning, his cloak still damp with rain. He carried with him a request from the queen herself, a tapestry to celebrate the birth of the crown prince. It was to be magnificent, depicting the royal gardens in full bloom, with golden threads forming a border that would catch the light in the great hall. Master Theron gathered his apprentices. "This is the work of a lifetime," he said. "I will oversee, but the weaving will be done by." His eyes moved across the eager faces. Elara. The room fell silent. The other apprentices exchanged glances. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. "Master, I don't think I'm ready." "Ready is not something you feel," Master Theron interrupted gently. "Ready is something you become by doing." For 3 weeks, Elara worked as she had never worked before. She arrived before sunrise and left long after sunset. Her meals were forgotten. Her sleep was restless and brief. The tapestry began to take shape, roses blooming in threads of pink and white, leaves unfurling in shades of green she had mixed herself. But as the deadline approached, the pressure became unbearable. Her hands, once nimble, began to shake. The threads that had once felt familiar now felt foreign. She began to make mistakes, small ones at first, then larger ones. A rose that should have been delicate became heavy and awkward. A vine that should have curved gracefully now twisted in an ugly spiral. The golden border began to pucker and pull. On the final night, as Elara worked by candlelight, exhaustion blurring her vision, the inevitable happened. Her elbow caught the edge of the loom. The frame shuddered. The carefully balanced tension snapped. The crack echoed through the workshop like a bone breaking. threads scattered like startled birds. 3 weeks of work unraveled in an instant. The beautiful roses, the carefully crafted leaves, the golden border, all of it lay in a tangled heap of ruined silk and wool. Elara stared at the destruction, her hands trembling. The royal commission. The trust Master Theron had placed in her. The other apprentices would hear about this. The whole village would know. She had failed. Completely, utterly, publicly failed. She sank to her knees among the scattered threads, and for the first time since arriving at the workshop, she wept. Not the quiet tears of frustration she had shed so many nights before, but the deep, soul-shaking sobs of someone who believed they had reached the end of their story. Master Theron found her there as dawn broke through the workshop windows, still kneeling among the ruins of her work. He said nothing at first, just stood there, his presence steady and calm. Finally, he spoke. "Come with me." He led her to a part of the workshop she had never seen, a small room behind his private chambers. The walls were lined with shelves filled with tapestries, old ones, faded ones, and each one was flawed. "These are my first works," Master Theron said, running his weathered hand along a tapestry that depicted a forest scene. "Look closely." Elara stepped closer. The trees were uneven. The colors were muddy in places. There were gaps where the weaving had been too loose, bumps where it had been too tight. It was imperfect. "This one," he continued, "was commissioned by a merchant. I was so nervous, I forgot to account for thread shrinkage. When it was finished, it was 3 inches too short." He chuckled. "I had to add a border made from scraps." The merchant loved it. Said it was the most unique piece he'd ever seen. Master Theron moved to a tapestry that was clearly different. It was beautiful, but there was something else, a depth, a soul. Even it had flaws, a crooked line here, a mismatched color there. "This one," he said, "was my greatest failure. And my greatest triumph." He told her the story. Years ago, he had been commissioned to create a tapestry for a grieving king whose beloved queen had died. The king requested a scene of the royal gardens where they had first met. "I tried to make it perfect," he said. "I wanted to capture not just the beauty of the gardens, but the love that had bloomed there. But when I presented it, the king stared at it a long time. Then he said, 'Master, this is beautiful, but it's not how I remember the gardens. In my memory, there were weeds among the roses, paths that curved in unexpected ways, imperfections that made it real.' That night, I nearly threw the tapestry in the fire. Instead, I added flaws. A weed here, a crooked path there, a rose slightly wilted. And as I worked, the tapestry began to breathe. It became not just a picture of gardens, but a memory of love. When I showed it to the king again, he wept. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. He said it reminded him that even his love had been imperfect, full of arguments, misunderstandings, moments of doubt. And that those imperfections hadn't weakened their love, they had made it human. You think you have failed because this is not perfect. But perfection is not the goal. The goal is truth. The goal is to weave something that speaks to the human heart, and the human heart is not perfect. It is cracked and mended, torn and repaired, beautiful in its brokenness. Your mistake was not that you failed to create perfection. Your mistake was believing that perfection was what was needed. The next morning, Elara began again. But this time, she didn't strive for perfection. She strove for truth. She gathered the threads from her broken tapestry. Some were kinked and twisted, others shortened and frayed. Instead of discarding them, she wove them into her new design. The royal gardens emerged again, but different. More alive. More real. A rose that had been damaged became a bud just beginning to bloom. A golden thread that had been stretched too tight now formed a path that curved naturally. The places where the original fabric had torn became clearings where sunlight filtered through. As she worked, Elara's hands no longer shook. Her breathing steadied. The fear of making mistakes was replaced by quiet confidence, not the belief that she wouldn't fail, but the knowledge that failure was not the end. When other apprentices gasped at small errors, Elara showed them how to turn mistakes into something beautiful. A color too bright could be softened. A line too straight could be curved with character. The tapestry was finished 3 days early. When Master Theron saw it, he was quiet. Then he nodded and Elara understood. It wasn't approval or critique. It was recognition. One weaver seeing the soul of another. The queen came to see the finished tapestry. As the fabric unrolled, she whispered, "It's beautiful. It looks exactly like the gardens where I played as a child. Even the weeds are there. Even the crooked paths. It's perfect because it's real." That night, Elara found a thread from her failed tapestry. She held it to the candlelight. And instead of seeing failure, she saw the beginning of her next story. And so, the young weaver learned that mastery was not about avoiding mistakes, but about learning to dance with them. She discovered that the most beautiful tapestries weren't flawless, they were fearless. Woven by hands that trusted the process, even when it meant starting again. Perhaps our lives are tapestries too. Perhaps what we call failures are just threads that haven't found their place. Maybe our mistakes aren't signs we're not good enough, but invitations to create something more honest, more beautiful, more real. The next time you feel like a failure, remember Elara. Remember that every master was once a beginner who refused to give up. That the most beautiful art doesn't come from perfect hands but persistent ones. That your so-called failures are not the end, they are the material your masterpiece is made from. Your journey is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming true. And truth, like the finest tapestry, is most beautiful when it includes both the golden threads and the humble ones, the straight lines and the gentle curves, the planned patterns and the happy accidents. May you find the courage to keep weaving, even when the threads tangle. May you discover that your greatest work might be the one that includes your mistakes, transformed into something magnificent. Be well, and rest easy. Your story is still being woven.